Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Season 1, Episodes 4 and 5. So, I decided that Episode 4 was a shorter episode, so I decided to just kind of lump 4 and 5 together. And plus, also, there's a point in time when I can kind of get both of these done. Um, really did enjoy these episodes. Like, it's getting to be, especially after the kind of the lay of the lands of the first two episodes. Like, these episodes are just really starting to get better and better and better. I guess because they naturally assume like it's like the thing that always happens is like just like well, like maybe people aren't going to get to like the first two episodes right out of the gate, but then once they start to invest, like we're gonna put out some really good product. I would assess because because this is a streaming show. This isn't like a show. So like they don't have the mentality of like, well, hey, not a bunch of people are gonna come in for the first two shows, but then they'll be there for the third one. Because a movie called Videodrome will tell you that weirdly. Uh, that is a very bizarre movie. Wouldn't recommend anyone seeing it, but because it's really bizarre. But I have all kinds of random knowledge of movies and TVs and stuff. So let's hope that I have enough knowledge to talk about these two episodes. So going into these two episodes, I really enjoyed it because we get a kind of changing of where's the focus. We get probably much more in episode 4 a like, hey, who didn't we cover in the last episode? And it seems like there was this very small focus on like I keep calling them the field hands, but I don't think that's the right terminology. You can just call them the Cowboys, or you can just call them Rip and his men, or any number of things. But yeah, so I just called them field hands because I think I heard that somewhere from someplace. I don't know where, but like I guess that's normally where I've kind of heard that kind of stuff. Speaking of heard, we have, of course, Rip and the guys going through and dealing with a cattle herd and kind of moving them along, kind of very city slickers like in this episode. And so it seems there's some like a lot of interesting things going on in episode 4 with both Rip and Jimmy. Like even in episode 5, we're still having some interesting things going on with these characters. But episode 5 much more focuses on Casey again, and is to deal with not only Casey, but then Casey and his family, and Casey reconnecting with his family in episode 5. So, both really a good, interesting combination of the two episodes. I just feel that uh, these shows are just kind of getting like I like the fact that these shows also like feel a little bit more like slowed down. I don't know what it was with me and the problem of the early episodes where I'm just like going like, man, there's a lot here. Um, Now I think I'm adjusting to this show, and like I think I'm kind of settling into the show and going on into watching this show for longer. So if you've not subscribed because you're otherwise just kind of not sure about this show, um, definitely go on, and especially after these episodes, I guarantee you there's some good content here. And so really that just well good content meaning the show, probably not good content meaning whatever the heck I'm going to say. But I'm going to try my best here. So, one thing that I have to mention from the last episode that I forgot to cover because there was a lot of stuff that I talked about in the last episode, but it seemed that in the last episode, Monica's sister-in-law, and this is weird to kind of open up this show or this review with this, but it happens in the early part of this episode. I'm like, oh, like, yeah, I was like, what the heck happened? And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, because it was like, for me, like, light bulb didn't come on right away because I was like, what? Like, what is Monica doing? Why is there a blood stain? And then I was like, oh yeah, I completely like blanked out of my brain that Monica's sister-in-law had decided to give her own life because she was grieving over the loss of her husband. And so that was a thing to kind of go into this fourth episode with the kind of aftermath of that. But that seems to not be the main focus because it kind of like quick transition from that, and because they like talk about it, Monica is kind of struggling uh, with her family a little, and just uh, starting to realize that maybe there is another family that she can go to that'll take care of her, and so on and so forth, or their equivalent of trying to take care of her, which is basically like, hey, money, here you go. Hey, you want lots of money? Here you go, kind of thing. And Monica's like, hold on a minute. Like, I don't want money. Here you go. Like, like, yeah, it's great that you guys, like, want to, like, take care of a family, but not quite that equivalent of taking care of a family is what Monica or Casey like. And we'll kind of find that out in episode 5. We'll talk about a little bit more. And so, with that said, I think that's all that I want to say about this. We're still tying in Beth and Jenkins in this episode. So that story is going to continue, as well as a number of other things. Uh, in this in this episode, we see. Uh, yeah, I was like, is Jamie even in this episode? I highly doubt it because he's more in a prominent role in episode 5. So I was like, okay, so why is he even in? Because like, why is he even in IMDb? Because he's not even in really this episode, sadly. But I'm still waiting on that Jimmy episode. I'm still waiting for it because it feels like we've gone and done in this episode. Technically, what I wanted was to go into like have a story with Rip, have a story with Jimmy. There's some really good payoffs in episode 4 where I was immediately just wanting that, and they gave that to me. So really good payoff there. Um, episode 5 has this really emotional scene between both Beth and Jamie in episode 5. And so, yeah, like get ready to go on a roller coaster in episode 5. If you aren't already going into a roller coaster in episode 4, because, yeah, there's a reason why they call this the long black train. So, let's go into it. Let's go out of our way to say that it's that customary double 5 time territory. Really liking the show. Really just enjoying it. And really just kind of anticipating getting back into this. But also realizing that, you know what, like, this is like, this show is good. And I also want to kind of like, because this seems like a meaty project to usually continue to go into. So like I'm kind of trying to balance, just be like, okay, if I'm not doing Yellowstone, I'll go and attack this project today, and so on and so forth. So yeah, let's go into it. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this episode. Let you know now, Peacock. Check it out. We have Peacock, so I can see Halloween Kills whenever I want, because that seems to be the only content that I would probably actually watch on there right now. But it does seem like a consistently, like besides Yellowstone, it seems like there's a ton of stuff that's actually on Peacock. But I'm also starting to dip my way into AMC Plus. So I don't know if that's going to have much content kind of taking out of there. But I saw something today from that. So let's go into it. Let's go into spoilers. So episode 4 is, of course, to... Where do I want to have the focus of this episode? Episode 4. Let's just go into the meat and the potatoes of it, and I think like the bigger story, and then we'll kind of cover the little. No, we'll cover some small things. So John Dutton. So John Dutton is going off and doing some work, and is to, of course, go and be kind of being thrashed by this horse. And there's, of course, two guys kind of going and sitting off to the side. One, Emmett Walsh, and one, Mickey Cregan. And so they're talking about how John Dutton, like, I don't know how, like, this guy could go on and be working with that kind of horse like that. If anything, one guy has mentioned that like his prostate wouldn't be able to handle like being kind of thrusted around by a horse like that. And so one guy has to turn to the other and mention, it's like, well, yeah, like John just got a part of him sliced out of him because he, of course, is to have colon cancer. And so that leaves to have Emmett go and take John and kind of pull him aside and is to ask him, it's like, hey man, do you think that you're like how are you feeling? And John's like, I'm tired and I'm hungry. And he's like, no, I mean long term. It's like, who told you? So now Emmett and John are having this conversation, and like Emmett is thinking, it's like, well, hey, like if you need to go and quit the job that you're in, that I think they end up having him say that he's some kind of commissioner. Like, what is John's job? I don't know. There's so much about this thing where there's so much like little tiny pieces of little details that I just miss in the show, or I just feel like I'm just like, huh, about these people, and I shouldn't be, because I'm a reviewer. But anyways, so John is talking with Emmett, and Emmett's like, well, hey, we can get a younger guy, and so on and so, and John is like, no. Like, no. Like, you're, like, he's basically telling Emmett, like, you're going to have to take this job away from me after my cold, dead hands. Or pry it out of my cold, dead hands, this job. Like, no. Like, I'm fine. Like, they cut it out of me, I'm okay. So, shut it. Just no. So we go on, and so now that that's kind of nipped in the bud, that sounded like the worst thing to say. I didn't, like, it just came out of my brain. It wasn't something that I planned or whatever to say there. Just whatever. So we go, and so we have Jimmy, who's going and trotting along with his horse. And so John is in this helicopter going and watching the cattle move. And so the helicopter is scaring the horses, supposedly. And now Rip is telling Jimmy that he needs to kind of get his horse in line to start trotting next to the cattle. And so Jimmy is like, well, won't that actually just like scare the cattle? And Rip is like, well, if anything, the helicopter is doing that just as well. So like you just like go on and do what I say. Jimmy starts trotting along. All of a sudden, uh, his horse, I guess, ends up getting spooked and he falls over the horse. And so Jimmy's to get off the horse, and Jimmy's fine, seemingly, with the exclusion of like walking funny, because of course he would, especially after a long horse ride. Uh, like I'm sure you're gonna be feeling all kinds of sore. So Jimmy's to go and lose his hat, and so uh, now we have so many names. Lloyd, who goes and ropes Jimmy's horse, and then like Jimmy's to go and get back his horse, and Lloyd is telling Jimmy, it's like, hey man, you gotta go and get your hat back, or people are gonna just like ridicule you about it till you go out and look for it. So Jimmy jumps on the horse, goes and gets his hat, and while it seems that he's miles and upon miles away from everyone else, Jimmy is to go on and find this small cattle in the middle of nowhere. And so when all the guys are to go off and get all the cattle in and rein all the cattle in, and Jimmy ends up coming in with this like baby calf, or baby, yeah, calf, cow, moo, cow. So Jimmy goes in there and he's like, well, who do you think the mother is? And Rip is like, who do you think? Because of course there is to be like a number of cows that are all to be either pregnant or, of course, whichever and what have you. It's hard to tell. So Jimmy goes in and tosses, of course, the baby cat told cow. What is the right terminology here? Small cow, so that would be a calf, right? Anyways, I didn't Google any of this. So Jimmy puts that in there, and so uh, it seems to be that Jimmy is like the new favorite, kind of in some weird way. And so we just have Fred, who's wanting to put Jimmy in his place. And so Fred goes and trips Jimmy. And so Jimmy ends up going and throwing the first punch. And so now Fred is beating the crap out of Jimmy, sadly. But Jimmy keeps getting back up. And so they keep punching one another, going back forth blows. And so Rip is to come in and is to kind of like stop this fighting. And so immediately Rip is to tell Fred, it's like, hey, if you want to punch somebody, you can punch me. Like, you can punch me all day long, and I'm going to punch you back. So, it's just like, man, like, do not F with Rip. Jeez. So, we have Rip who grabs Jimmy and like pulls his shirt to where it shows the Yellowstone logo, and Rip is say like, if you punch or you beat anybody that is to have this tattoo, you're gonna have to answer to me. And so Rip is to say to Fred, if you fight anybody, you're dead. You're dead. You're going to die. So eventually it just leads to Fred just having this lip on him that he just starts to spout out and whatever. So, like, you know what, Fred? You're gone. Like, fired. Like, we're done with you. Like, get your meal and get the out of here. So we have Lloyd, who is to go and take Fred to the bus station, or to the train station, I mean. Because Rip is to go and talk to John about this, and Rip is to mention that, hey, like, Fred has, like, seen some things. He's been here for a long time. And so John is like, well, then take him to the train station. And so Rip is like, are you sure? He's like, okay. And so now they're to go and need to get a guy from the prison system to work for them. So I'm like, okay, all right. To kind of replace that guy who had, of course, is going to be taking a really long train. Very long. So Lloyd goes off to take Fred to the train station. And so they are going to Wyoming. And so now Lloyd goes and stops at one point, takes all of Fred's stuff and dumps them off to the side of this cliff. And Fred is like, hey man, like, what are you doing with my stuff? And he's like, this is the train station, and like, and you're off. So Lloyd goes and shoots Fred right in the head, kills him, and I'm like, what? I'm like, say what? They're shooting this guy? It's like, well, yeah, I guess, like, that whole kind of thing of, like, this guy could talk. This guy could tell some stories. This guy, like, I guess could snitches get stitches kind of thing. So, like, it's one of those where they want to, like, basically just be like, yeah, you're not going to be talking ever. We're not even going to give you the opportunity. So this guy dies, and Lloyd chucks all of his crap off to the side of this road, and I'm like, wow, that is quite a story there. So now let's cover some more John stuff, because I kind of curved around a little bit of a story here. So it seems that Casey is to kind of on his own because he has his own stuff to kind of deal with today. So John is going to take Tate to kind of keep him busy. And so both John and Tate go to the wild, wild wilderness to go next to the river. So now Tate is going off to get some wood for the fire, and John is to ask Tate to get bigger and bigger pieces. And so Tate is like, well, hey, like, like, can't you get the bigger pieces? And John's like, no, I'm supervising. Like, go ahead and go and get that fire. So Tate goes and tries to get this fire. All of a sudden, we hear this kerplunk for whatever reason. I'm like, okay, what the heck happened? Because they didn't show what happened, because of course they didn't. So I guess off camera, we just have to naturally assume that Tate got knocked unconscious somehow, or maybe he tripped and something happened there. Maybe Tate was playing around with something, or was trying to grab this branch and he just kind of fell over into the river. So now John is just kind of like, okay, like, I heard the kerplunk. So Tate is to be in the river, and so John is now going and running, like, taking off some of his clothes and running off to figure out where Tate is in this river. John jumps in front of where Tate is, grabs Tate, gets him out of the water, and so now it's the whole thing of trying to beat hypothermia, because we don't know what part of the season this is. Plus, also, just, I'm sure the river is just really cold regardless. So John is trying to, of course, kind of like doing the whole Batman Begins thing where it's like do like a rub down of like this kid's body so he can kind of keep warm. But John also has to kind of do that for himself. But it's a mixture between both John and Tate with body heat that's to be the kind of the working kind of thing here. So after John and Tate are to kind of like make it through their hypothermia, because Tate ends up at one point just kind of falling over, and John has to go and grab him to just kind of like keep him up, keep him alive. So Tate is to have like a scar upon his face, and so he ends up going to the hospital to go and get that kind of stitched up. So John is to go and talk to Tate and just kind of like talk it out, and like it seems like they like the company of one another, and that Tate is to also notice that John has a scar. And so John makes up this story about like, well, yeah, I was fighting a sword fighter, and coincidentally, on the one day that there was to be a sword fighter present, I too had a sword and I stabbed him. And it's like it's this kind of fun story that he just makes up because, like, of course he would. So, like, Tate is to just kind of like have him and John kind of just having fun here, and uh, so John and Tate are going on this horse, and so Casey's like, you know what? They've been gone for a really long time. Um, how about like I go out and grab a horse and like find them? So Casey goes off, and John is coming back, and so John is to mention like, hey, like yeah, John's gonna get a or Tate's gonna get a scar upon his face. You might as well go to the hospital to go and kind of stitch that up. But otherwise, he's fine. It's like, well, why did he get a scar? It's like, so Case is to go and race off to get his son to the hospital, as well as like we also have to deal. I'll get to it a little bit, but we'll finish this up. So Casey goes off. Rip is to kind of talk to John, and here's where we transition into the point of Rip going and talking about firing Fred and needing to get a guy from the prison. But John and Ripper to have this conversation where Rip, of course, is asked, like, hey, is Tate okay? Are you okay? Like, what's going on? And so John has to mention that he almost lost Tate at some point, and Rip was just like, well, like, there is no almost. And so John is like, well, who taught you that? And he's like, you did. So that kind of covers that. So Monica, who had to go and carve out a part of her carpet, sadly enough, because Monica's sister-in-law had taken her own life. And so a lot of the kids are going and taking a shower together for some reason and save water because so Monica's mother is to go off and leave to just have like Monica kind of forcibly dealing with the whole situation at hand, cleaning up this house, so on and so forth. So Monica goes off to, of course, go to the ranch because there's not much else of family left besides John and his family. So, uh, really towards the very end of this episode, and I'm not going to stop episode 4 right here and there. Like, there's also some other things to kind of sliverly cover for episode 4. So, Monica, Tate, after they go to the hospital, and the one nurse is to mention that, like, kids are made out of rubber, and so, like, they'll fall. It happens. So Monica, Tate, and Casey are driving home for, of course, Casey to get arrested and is to go to jail. Because we end up finding out in the next episode, because it takes forever for them to, like, say what had happened, why he was arrested. And so I'll get to that in the next episode. So the rest of this is to kind of, like, talk about other certain characters. So Beth, what's going on with Beth? So Beth in this episode is to go on with Jenkins to eventually go to this bar where supposedly this is a really rough, unsavory bar where, like, I say that, but, like, probably Jenkins has it coming for whatever reason. Possibly. I feel sorry for the man. But, like, maybe he has it coming to him. I don't know. Hence why I guess you probably don't, if you already started a fire, don't pour more gasoline. It's kind of, I guess, could be the analogy here of, like, this guy is, like, he's already playing with fire, and, like, he's throwing gasoline on it by mixing himself up with Beth, because, like, she is really good at her what she does, like, and so on and so forth. So yeah, an impressive woman for sure. So Beth is to go to this bar, and so Jenkins is to start to get beat up by anyone who is to flirt with Beth, and Jenkins is to try to defend Beth's honor, to go and, of course, consistently get punched in the face, sadly. And so Jenkins is asking Beth, it's like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you trying to get all these people to beat me up? Maybe we should leave here. And Beth is like, no. Like, let's stay. Because Beth is to try to remember remind Jenkins that the North, or a certain kind of people, didn't exactly win the Civil War at some point. Or kind of, like, just, like, there was this weird dialogue of that. So, that eventually leads in episode 5, where it seems that Beth ends up going and bumping into Jenkins's lady, Victoria Jenkins, and there's, like, a whole ordeal with that, which is actually really fun. Because, yeah, it seems like there's really some things going on with that story. So, with that said, I hope that I've covered most of episode 4, but I'm sure something probably slipped through the cracks. Because, yeah, it's a whole lot of 4, so to speak. But, yeah, so episode 5. So, now, the goal of episode 5 is to basically have Casey stay on this ranch, to basically book him a lifetime supply of ranch. Like, you're going to stay here forever. We're going to come up with some kind of way to incentivize you to stay here. And because I'm kind of like, I would kind of like to hope that if John were to have had a will of sorts, that he would probably leave the ranch to probably Casey, and in my mind, for some weird reason, because like Jamie is set up, he's fine. Beth is to be as set up as she can possibly be, with the exclusion of her, of course, unleashing some crazy now and again. But it feels like she is technically set up. It's just that uh, Casey's to probably be the only one who is kind of behind the eight ball out of everyone else. So, but like, we're not gonna kind of hatch or what is the like? We're not gonna put the pot before the kettle because John is still a character in this show. So, for episode 5, let's focus on like what we should focus on is Casey. So Casey, he was on the last episode, of course, going and being of course like, well, shall we go to jail? So of course Casey is to probably not exactly figure out why he went to jail. It seems that like John didn't know like what Casey was being charged with. Neither was um, Monica, and so we find out when Casey is, of course, to go and talk to the sheriff, uh, Sheriff Ben Waters, and Thomas Rainwater is also there. We find out that uh, now Casey's in a sticky situation because the bodies had been dug up, and we see that in episode 4 where Rainwater is to go and break the bones and shove it in this guy's face and be like, yeah, I'm sure these bones are really fresh. These human remained bones that I'm now breaking a bone off to whip this right in your face to tell you, like, yeah, these bones are pretty fresh. They're freshly dead. So Casey is to now go on and have, of course, Ben Waters questioning him about why his gun barrel uh, that is in, of course, their system is to go ahead and match uh, the bullets fired into these two people, and like what is the story behind these two dead bodies. So Casey, of course, is to explain this whole story. I'm not going to waste the time explaining this whole story. Check one of the other reviews, which is the last one that I had done, and you'll eventually know that whole ordeal, that whole story, and I don't feel I need to repeat that whole story. I have a whole review for that. So, Casey tells the whole story, and they're like, okay, that seems like a thing that we can check into. It seems like Rainwater is really tempted to want to check into that story. And so what happens is that Jamie is to arrive because he is, of course, to be on a helicopter. And John is to tell Jamie, it's like, yeah, get the heck out of there. Or get Casey out of there. Like, bring him home. Like, don't you come back without him with you. So Jamie's like, yeah, of course, that's what my goal is. So Casey arrives, and so now we have them having to like regurgitate what all they had talked about here. And so immediately Jamie is like, okay, why is it that he has your gun barrel and vice versa? Like, you have a sanctioned weapon that does not have the right gun piece why is that? And so Rainwater is looking at Jamie, is like, man, you are smart. like like you are just really going and like figuring out a way to get your brother out of this, and like more and more it's digging a hole into Ben Waters' like mind of things, just like, well, yeah, I guess if there's to be a problem here, I might be tied or attached or whatever, and that is to have Ben Waters go and like mention what had happened to a prior case, and so on and so. So there's so much that could uh, eventually put a downside to Ben Waters' kind of story about what had gone on recently. So like the more and more that Jamie is to talk, the more and more hot water that it seems that Ben Waters is in, and also Casey is in. And just kind of mentioning about how this whole story of exchange, like barrel cases, has all happened. So now Jamie is to hold on to Casey's gun and say, like, okay, we are now going to finally just trade the gun barrels back. Because Jamie starts to chime in quickly with how Jamie's weapon could be on file with this police department, and then they say, well, because the barrels were exchanged. It's like, okay, so let's exchange them back right now. So Jamie goes and gets a part of his gun back, but not the whole thing, because Jamie is going to keep the gun barrel, and Casey's like, well, hey, I want the rest of my gun back. And Jamie's like, not if your life depended on it. You're not getting your gun back because like you're making all kinds of problems. Plus, also, this gun barrel is tied to a number of issues, a number of problems, and so yeah, might as well just find a place to melt down that gun barrel so there's no other evidence linking Casey to anything. So Casey is to make it back to the ranch, and so now we have a whole entire episode where John is trying to make Casey and Monica's life better and to superglue them here to this ranch, where uh, where John is having Casey like do some horse whispering, so to speak, because there seems to be a horse that is to be a problem for them. And so Casey is to just be like, well, how about I go on and I train this horse for free, and and you don't pay me anything. And so John is like, well, that is a win-win for everybody but you. like that's a winning scenario for anyone but you. So like, why would I even have you do that? So Casey goes and trains the horse anyways, and he finds that there's no problem with it. And Casey, I guess, was just realizing that his father was just kind of wasting time or coming up with some kind of excuse for Casey to stay here or find something that he could stay here to do. So John is going off and talking to Monica when Monica is to not know what Casey is being sentenced for. And so John is to mention to Casey that it seems like her focus is to be on today and not about tomorrow. And so it seems that he's starting to realize that John and Monica are struggling because they're thinking about today and not tomorrow. So John goes and has Tate go off to get some cookie, which is about the size of his like freaking melon, the size of his head almost. And so Tate comes back with this cookie, And John is like, well, hey, you're going to have to go and get another cookie because this one's mine. And so Tate goes running off to go and get another cookie because he's like, you, like, you got me. So Tate runs off and gets another massive cookie that's the size of his head. So, which I thought was so funny. Like, the kind of, like, them having John and Tate together is such like a dynamic duo of things, and like their interactions together are fun. But yeah, it's always like Tate is like, I have to go and do something. It's like, hey man, like you're becoming a show regular. So Tate is also getting some more work in, and he's to go off and talk to Casey. And so Casey is to mention that he loves it here, and he doesn't want them to go back to their old house. And Casey is to say to Tate, it's like, hey, like, shut up. We worked really hard to get that house, and you should be grateful that you have a house to like live in, kind of thing. Tate starts crying, running off. It's like, I can't talk to you anymore, and runs off. It's like, I'm sure you were crying. Because crying is freaking hard on a show or a movie, unless like somebody freaking punches you hard enough or whatever to make you freaking cry. Because there's a lot of times where a lot of actors have that too, where basically freaking like there's a lot of times where people will be shouting at somebody until they cry because like they need it for this scene. Um, so it's just kind of the mental games of crying on a show, and Tate has uh, tried to accomplish that twice now. So yeah, it's a hard process, but like because yeah, like going into like two whole acting school or classes for high school like means nothing because you like learn to just improvise and you barely know what that really means. So and so like crying, it's just like how would you even cry on a show, let alone um like learn how to do any number of things, especially memorizing like a crap ton of lines, because that's always the Herculean task that any actor will probably tell you. It's just like, yeah, I'm not sure if I can memorize all that stuff. Um, so, but pushing on. So, John eventually is again to take Tate and like, hey, he's gonna sleep with me tonight. Casey, you and Monica can just go uh, and just go back, I guess, where Casey had at some point taken a number of women, and Monica is to mention that it's like, well, hey, what fancy shirt were you wearing when you won this girl over? And Casey's like, what are you talking about, fancy shirt? Or something like that. I see fancy, but whatever. Like Monica is to mention that Casey must have had some like shirt that he always wanted to keep as clean as possible to win over some woman with. And Casey's like, well, I think every single one of my shirts that I've ever had has always been a work shirt. Like I haven't had anything else close to that. And excuse me. Sorry, my apologies. So Monica is to like for me, I know a lot of the clothes that I would usually wear, like bizarrely, are workout clothes, and like I haven't been doing that in a while. But I just like the feel of them. They're like athletic clothes are way more comfortable than anything else. So that's my go-to to just kind of wear shirts that are to be like kind of the athletic style of things. So Hence why when I went into certain jobs and whatever, it's just like, man, I just want to wear like something athletic and whatever because it's more comfortable. And it's always just like, hey, you can wear like dress pants and polos and like like man, if I could just find a job where it's just like wearing athletic clothes 24/7, because they let you do that, man, that would be sweet. Because I'd wear that anyways. So, but pushing on. So, uh, we go on, and so like we had this little fun dialogue, and so now let's get to the Beth and Jamie stuff. So, also in episode 4, Beth was going and was to be calling for Jenkins at the place that he is to be held at. I guess his work environment, and so Beth is going and like smoking, and so there's to be people at this place that Jenkins is to be working at, and they're kind of wanting to have Beth like to stop smoking. And so one of the managers is to come in and is to tell Beth to like, hey, I'm sorry, but you can't smoke. Beth looks around, it's like, you know how that makes absolutely no sense. Like there's a burner that's on fire. There's like a fireplace that has some hot coals on it. There's like 3 to 4 places that are all just having some kind of fire lit one way or the other. And I just love it how Beth is just like, so you're okay with any number of these places being set ablaze, but if I'm to light up, like, oh no, like immediately you're gonna come to me and have a problem. So the guy is just like, yeah, I'm not gonna deal. So this guy walks off. So Beth is like, give me a drink, you tattletailer, tattletale, whatever. So now Beth at some point is to go and talk to Bob Schwartz, uh, because Beth is really working Jenkins over. At some point when like Bob is to mention like, hey, like you need to get back to work, like you need to get back to your business, and Beth is just like why do I even need to go back, like, and Bob is like, you can't control a company from Skype, and Beth is just like yeah, I can. Like I can and I will. Like if a business fails, oh well. Like it's so Beth ends up going and spotting Jenkins and his wife uh, Victoria, and when Beth is at this bar and sees Victoria, she's like, "Who dis? New phone? Who dis?" And so Jenkins is like, "Well, she's my wife." And Beth is like, "Oh, yeah, well, like, well, me and Jenkins have been getting very intimate lately." And so, like, intimate with some things here and there. So we have, like, Beth just, like, really playing around with Victoria, and Victoria's like, oh yeah, like I'm really new here to this place, and like so like maybe you and me could be really good friends, and like all this and that and yada yada yada. So Veronica is to go off, and so Beth is to tell Jenkins, it's like, well, hey, when she comes back, tell her to come over with me. We'll have some fun. And so Beth goes back to Bob and is to say like, yeah, by the time I'm through with Jenkins, like Bob is gonna have to adopt Jenkins's like kids, like his two daughters. So Jenkins is evidently to have lied about how he ended up getting beaten up, because Jenkins is to mention that he was in a car accident, and so Veronica is to tell Beth that, and so Beth is just like, "Oh yeah, that's how he got those bruises. Yeah, uh-huh." So Beth goes on, and so like that's kind of what happens with that whole rigmarole. So now Beth is to kind of leave her bar, and she is to, I guess, be really sloshed or whatever, drunk. Beth is to have nobody to really call, so she ends up calling Jamie, and and Jamie's like, I'm not gonna pick up the phone for her. Like, Jamie has this cell phone like right in front of him, which I'm like, okay, that's convenient, but F it, it's funny. It's fun. So Jamie is to see that Beth is calling, and he's like, seriously? Like, I'm gonna be like a person that's gonna pick up my phone for you. So, and it's funny because also the ringtone that Beth has is some kind of like spooky, scary song that Jamie has for her. And he's like, no, like I'm gonna drink my drink and I'm not gonna give a about Beth. So Beth, like the ringtone is to go off, and he's like, oh, all right, well, like that tells her to just F off. And so Beth calls again. So Jamie's like, God, this is never going to end. So Jamie picks up the phone. Beth is to tell Jamie, it's like, hey, have Rip come pick me up. And Jamie's like, well, Rip is busy. Like, is there something I can do for you? Is there an Uber I can call? That's what I would have said. So Beth is to tell Jamie, it's like, come and pick me up because I'm drunk and you're there, so pick me up. So Jamie hauls his butt out of the way to go and find Beth. And so Beth is to drive off with Jamie. And again, they're like slapping one another. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, watch the road. He's smacking away at her and all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like, God, watch the road. Like, I'm expecting them to get into some car accident horrifically and get injured, because definitely do not kill these people off. Because, like, the consistent, like, debacle between both of them is so interesting. So, just Beth and Jamie just smacking it out. So, it gets to the point um where Beth is to tell Jamie, it's like, well, like, how much of a loss have you ever had? And so Jamie is to mention, it's like, well, I lost the same mother as you did. like I have had as much as equal loss as you have ever had. And so Jamie is to see that Beth is to pull this gun out of this glove compartment, and so Beth is to kind of cock the gun and to put it next to her like neck, and Jamie's like, "Frickin' do it!" And I'm like, "Oh my God, Jamie!" The viciousness between these two characters, and Jamie's like, "Frickin' do it!" Like, I'm like, wow. Alrighty then. Wow. Like, but that's the like the thing where the show is so good that you're just like, man, just the viciousness between these characters. But you also have Beth, who's to mention like about her mother without like where with Evelyn just mentioning without a single ditch of love in her eyes is to tell Beth to go out and get someone to like help her uh, before she is to die. And so with this whole line of dialogue, would we have to say that Casey was with Evelyn? Because that was my confusion moment where it obviously I guess had to be that Casey was there when Evelyn was to die, not Jamie. Like I thought it would have made a lot of sense for Beth and Jamie to be there at the same moment, but maybe it was Casey. Confusion happens. So or Casey was to almost get like taken by some coyote, but John kind of came by at the last minute. So we just have off screen supposedly because Beth is to fire off a shot, and so to kind of like quickly break on the car, and we're like, oh my god, did it happen? Like god, there's so much about this show where they kind of have these off camera like sounds where you're just like, oh my god, what happened? Like it grips you. It of course is like this tease of something where it's like, oh my god, like please don't let something happen to a certain character, which makes you realize how much you have invested in these characters. It's the it's the suckering in thing where you're just like, oh my god, did this happen to this character? And this has now happened within 2 episodes? Why do they keep wanting to do this kind of stuff? I don't know why, but it's intriguing. It's a different kind of approach to like doing a show. Because normally you would get that from some horror movie where it's like, oh, hey, I'm going to drop a book like right in front of you, and you'd be like, "Oh, what was that?" Like we're doing a horror element in a normal show to just kind of keep people on the edge of your seat, just going, "What the heck happened? Huh? She pulled the trigger. Gun was fired. What the fuck?" But and now I'm also stretching this out. Also, Beth is okay. Beth just fires out a bullet, and so now finally like Jamie is to just tell Beth it's like, you know what, like I am here if you need somebody to hate so you won't hate so much of yourself for a moment, like I will be here to be that person for you. So Beth is to go off after both Jamie and Beth go home. Uh, Beth goes off and just finds a room and like just screams bloody murder uh, from the outside in because like we just have like John who's like, what the fuck? And so because John and Tate are kind of reading a book together, and so all of a sudden he's hearing Beth kind of like, ah! And so John goes to Jamie and is just kind of like, hey, like, aren't you happy that Casey's here? Like, relish in these moments, because, yeah, uh, like, for how much family that we have to just kind of, like, deal with, like, kind of, like, only think about the positive instead of the negative. Because Jamie is telling John, it's like, Beth needs to get out of here. Like, she needs to leave. And John is like, no. she can't leave. She has to stay here. Um, because the one thing that Beth is, Jamie can't be, and that is evil, conniving, whatever word you want to kind of say here. That Beth is to have something that Jamie um, can't do, can't have, can't be, can't whatever. So it'll be interesting when Jamie kind of hears this from his father, what Jamie is going to do in the following episodes. Because still, I'm waiting for that Jamie episode. I'm waiting for that Jamie focused episode that it feels like we need sometime soon. When are we going to get that? Never? Probably. But, like, it would just be nice to have this, like, character carry an episode for once. Because it just seems like he's kind of in bits and pieces here. So maybe if they need kind of a filler episode where everybody's on vacation, maybe that'll kind of lay to the wings of Jamie being on this episode, or the focus of this episode. So let's also talk about Rip going and finding a guy named Walker. And so Walker, of course, is to be picked up from this prison. And so Rip is to ask Walker, it's like, hey, what kind of experience do you have? And so Walker is just kind of plop down all the experience that he is to have. And so I'm kind of wondering, with this new character being like added in, like how much time they're going to still have for Jamie, or is that just kind of the way the cookie crumbles here, where it's just like, okay, like we have this guy, now it's going to be possibly a trade-off between Walker and Jamie. So like I kind of thought that the whole like Walker name was some kind of joke that Rip had, where he's kind of like making a joke about like Walker Texas Ranger or something. That's where I thought that that was from, but no, that's his actual name. So Walker is to like tell Rip about his experience, and so Rip is like, okay, like get in the truck, like let's go. So Walker is to go and like introduce him to the guys, or introduce himself to the guys, and so they end up realizing that he has a guitar case with a guitar in it, and so they're like, hey, do you sing? Do you play? What do you do? And he's like, oh, okay, I do both. So he ends up asking him, it's like, well, hey, do you like a happy song or a sad song? And they're like, happy song. And so Walker ends up going into this song, which I think he was just to play them whatever the heck that he wanted anyways. And so this song just kind of comes off as this kind of sad song, of course. And I was just kind of like, okay, uh, kind of not sure exactly why they like did a song here, because every once in a while when there's a song to be done on a show, immediately that's just like the kind of the I always groan about it, just because it's like, oh, it's a filler moment, or oh, it's a whatever kind of moment that I normally don't like, but I actually liked the song in here because that helps us understand this character. It helps us understand Walker, that his happy song is to be this weird sad song that immediately once the guy is to be done singing it, they're like, man, you better never sing a sad song, because good God, that song was bleak. Um, so Walker is to now have to go off with Rip to go and get his Yellowstone branding because he's a prisoner. I'm like, oh, okay, so anybody who is to have gone to jail and whatever. Like they're gonna have to get branded by this. And I was like, okay, so now I understand the whole branding thing. If I didn't, of course, see it before in the pilot episode with Jimmy. So we have Walker and going and having to consider being branded, and Rip is to tell Walker, it's like, well, hey, like, don't think of it as a brand, think of it as a tenure. Like, think of it that you're going to be here for a long time, and that this is going to show loyalty. And so Walker is just like, okay, like, brand me. So as Walker is getting his brand, Monica is to watch on to see Walker get branded, and she is to realize that at one point Casey had gone and got branded also, and like now she is kind of seeing this and realizing what like her husband had to go through. So, and also seeing that like Casey was to be like welcomed into uh like these people, and to just say like, hey man, it's not just like, it's not that like you're going to be protected if you come and you get this brand. So like it's family, it's a kind of family, which is kind of an interesting kind of thing with these branded guys, because Jimmy is to go off and he is to kind of walk his horse to of course get going for the day, and Jimmy just is struggling to get on his horse, and I'm just like, yeah, freaking, I'm sure I can probably understand something like that, where like Jimmy like is to go and get on his horse and he is to just kind of fall over because he's like, God, I hate this job. And so Lloyd is to come over and say like, hey man, do you need to go to the hospital? Like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And so like Lloyd is just kind of realized that like the shame of everything is to possibly weigh on Jimmy. And so now like we're gonna go on and have Jimmy just go on to another day of work. So with that said, I hope that I've kind of covered most of these episodes or most of the things of this episode. I always have to double back and question things because I know something slipped through the cracks in whichever. Um, that's bound to happen. So, episode 5, I think I've covered most of everything, but I always have to like re-question everything also. Um, oh, let's cover the Jenkins Victoria stuff. So, Jenkins goes home, and Victoria is to like seemingly be kind of like things are not going well between her and Jenkins. It seems that Veronica is very drunk, and that she is to basically like start taking off all of her clothes and have Jenkins just F her right there. And Jenkins is like, just go to sleep, just go to bed. And so Veronica's to walk off and just be like, well, then I'll do it myself. Like, wow, okay. So uh, Jenkins is to go and call a girl named, I think it's Melody. Uh, and so Melody is to go and ask, like, well, hey, how bad is it? Like, how, like, is it like drop everything that I need to do to go and get there? And Jenkins is like, well, no, it's like apocalypse level, like get here as soon as you can. And so Melody is to go and is to say, okay, well, I'll be there by tomorrow, and I'll go and I'll get a thing of luggage ready. And so then Jenkins is like, no, get a lot of luggage ready. And she's like, well, I'll go and I'll get a Foot Locker, get as ready as I can. So so again, like the part of this family, John and Jamie are trying to get Casey to stay here, and so Jamie is to go and find a guy named Mel Thompson, who recently saw him in the Conjuring movies, and it was kind of interesting, kind of seeing him here because I'm like, I had just seen this guy in like the Conjuring films as the priest, the father in in those movies. So Mel Thompson has come in to offer Monica this job opportunity that is to seemingly be like way increasingly probably more lavish than what her price range was to have been originally from getting paid from a job. So Monica is to have a spit take at this moment because she's like, so what now? Like, you're offering me how much money? Because it seems that Monica is to have a rare thing of being able to teach certain people stuff that Mel does not have. So he's like, I definitely want to like offer you this job. And so Monica is like, well, if I go and I leave my reservation, there's not going to easily be a filling spot for that job. So Monica and John go and talk alone, and Monica's to be like, no, like, I don't want this job. Like, I don't want to do this. So John and Jamie talk, and so Jamie is to just be like, John is telling Jamie, it's like, man, like, neither Casey nor Monica, like they like just don't in their brain think of anything logically, like like they're defying logic uh to try and not like stay in this home, to stay in this environment. And so Jamie is like, well, yeah, it's like, hey, like they're it's like it's just the way they're built, it's just the way they're programmed, weirdly enough. So yeah, I think that covers most of this episode, roundabout way. There's something that I missed. Let me know in the comments below, because I'm sure there's something I did miss. Trying to rattle around in my brain if there's anything else that I could have talked about for this one. I know this is a long review because there's a lot of stuff to unpack here, especially in episode 5 because it's a 50-minute episode. So, with that said, uh, yeah, I think I covered everything. I hoped I've covered everything. And I'm going to uncover that I'm going to get the heck out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody. If there's anything that I possibly missed through a number of these episodes, because I'm sure that's going to happen, I'm going to go on to the next review and probably have a rebuttal or kind of do some kind of like, oh yeah, this just popped in there, because that's what always happens. Like, I'll finish the review and I'll like realize that I forgot like 20 different things that I should have also talked about. So with that said, bye everybody. Bye everybody.